Very good. Okay. Well, welcome everybody. Really happy you could be here this morning. To those of you that are here in person, and also there's a number of you joining us virtually around the world. Big honor to have you in here. My name is Matthew, and today I'm going to begin with a story. So years ago, I took a trek through the Peruvian Andes Mountains, one of the most beautiful and rugged places that I've seen in my life. And during this trek, my guide and I stopped at a small farm tucked away in the mountains for the night. The residents were an elderly couple, and they provided us with a place to set up our tents and offered to cook us dinner for what basically amounted to pocket change. And that night, we ate in their home, which was a single room hut with a dirt floor that also housed live guinea pigs and chickens, which was a typical protein source in the rural Andean diet. And inside this room, they slept, they lived, they butchered and cleaned animals, they cooked, ate, drank, kept warm by the fire. Everything they did happened in this room. The next morning, while drinking coca tea with the elderly farmer named Sacha, he explained that while his son and daughter were away for days at a time to sell produce in the city market, he and his wife stayed at home and took care of the farmstead. His wife cared for the grandchildren and prepared food while he maintained the farm. And on his agenda that day was to clear more land by hand and also pick potatoes. So after tea, we both said our goodbyes, and with a big smile on his face and a scythe towering over him in his right hand, he slowly hobbled off into the fields, and I put on my backpack and continued on to my journey. So I tell you this story very much the same way that I told my brother Eric over a campfire during a mountain bike trip a few years ago. One thing you'll learn about me if you get to know me is a lot of my stories come from camping and hiking trips. And when I was telling this to my brother, I wanted him to appreciate the romanticism of a poor family living off the land in a rugged country. But his unexpected response was one that changed the course of my life. There we go. Sorry, I gotta back up a little bit. So I wanted my brother to appreciate the story for its romanticism, but instead he began asking me questions like, do you think, given a choice, that the farmer would choose to go out and dig potatoes at his ripe old age? And do you think that his elderly wife prefers to collect firewood, cook indoors on a polluting wood stove, and hover over the fire to stay warm on frigid mountain nights? Do you think, given a choice, they might prefer to stay inside and read to their grandchildren or go out to dinner with friends? The warmest years on the planet have all happened in the last decade, and 2023 is currently on track to being the hottest year on record. And energy production from fossil fuels is a primary contributor to an ever-increasing global temperature. And as developing nations desire more energy and developed nations strive to transition to cleaner sources, it's extremely important that we make the best choices available to us. So this is what has brought me here today. 2 years ago, I would have never imagined that I'd be organizing a symposium with Generation Atomic and Nuclear New York as part of the United Nations Science Summit. But after discovering the world's most misunderstood energy source, that is nuclear energy, I've come to understand that we need more voices to speak up for this technology, which is uniquely well positioned simultaneously to address climate change as well as energy poverty. While nuclear energy has an established 7 decades of proven decarbonation and reliable operation, anti-nuclearism has nearly as long of an established agenda, which what seems to be rooted in ideology rather than science. They will say it's not clean or safe, and when you demonstrate that it is, they'll say it's too expensive. And when you show that that's not necessarily so, they'll say it'll take too long. And around we go. So this conjures up memories of a children's book from Dr. Seuss, Green Eggs and Ham. I am Sam, Sam I am. Would you like nuclear power, man?
I do not like it, Sam I am. I do not like that nuclear plan.
Would you like it without the waste? Or perhaps if it were built with haste?
I do not want it if built in haste, not without waste. It's just misplaced.
Would you like it if it's small, with modular parts, one and all?
I do not like it small or big, no matter the type. It's not my gig.
Would you try it if it's clean, the cleanest energy you've ever seen?
Not if it's clean, not if it's bright. No matter the pitch, it doesn't seem right.
Would you, for its might, with 24/7 power, day and night?
Not for its might, not day or night. My heart for solar and wind takes flight.
Could you like it if it's cost-effective, making power less elective?
I don't care if it saves a dime. It's the principle, Sam, every time.
That's my brother Eric. I'll give him credit for this poetry. Over the course of today, we will shine a light on the tremendously important role nuclear has to play in our energy future, as well as address popular misconceptions that have hovered over the technology for decades. We will have networking opportunities throughout the day as well as lunch, and our speakers are going to be ready and available to engage in conversation with you. So we encourage you to come up and talk to us. We're also going to have, most of our sessions are going to have question and answer at the end of it. So if you're coming up with questions, have those prepared because we'll be running mics at the end of each session. We owe a grand thank you to our primary sponsor, Constellation Energy, and all the many contributed sponsors that you see in the program today. We also owe a big thanks to the speakers that came out today who invested their time and energy to being here today and representing nuclear energy. So with that, I commence the United Nations Science Summit and Nuclear Climate Week's Symposium on Nuclear Energy. So for our first speaker, we have Veeshesh Sunassy. Veeshesh is the president of the North American Young Generation in Nuclear and frequently goes to schools, a specific chapter, Durham chapter, right? He frequently goes to schools and universities to inspire students to join nuclear and the climate change workforce. He's also co-lead of the COP28 delivery team for Nuclear for Climate. His goal is to engage with the public and influence policymakers about the important role of nuclear in climate change discussions. Veeshesh and I have worked together on a number of projects, including educational webinars and organizing a climate activist networking event.
reach net carbon zero. Happy to see a lot of people here today, amazing audience here and even online. And just want to start by getting a feel from the audience. And I'm going to ask two questions. The first one, by a show of hand, who thinks nuclear is clean? Most people. We don't have a lot of people to convince that. That's good. Now the second question I have, what I'm showing right now is the world map of the electricity sector and its carbon emission by country or by region. You could see there's a lot of green countries here. Who can guess what these green countries have in common in terms of their electricity mix? Shoot. Nuclear? Hydro? Nuclear and hydro, that's right. Let's see. Want to start by Finland. Guess who's there? Nuclear. 37% of the energy currently coming from nuclear. Let's look at another country. France. What's there? Nuclear again, 77%. And I want to finish with Ontario, because that's where I'm from. Ontario, 60% nuclear. So that's a good map to show you in terms of your electricity mix, what countries are clean and what they are using for their electricity generation. And just want to pause on Ontario for a second here. You could see it's 85% low carbon for its electricity generation. So I want you to keep that in mind. 85% low carbon. %85 low carbon, which means currently Ontario's carbon emission from the electricity sector is just 2%. It's 2%, but still Ontario releases about 165 megatons of CO2 per year, namely from the building sector, the transportation sector, and the industry sector. This is an important message because decarbonizing your electricity sector is not enough. We need to think broader in terms of decarbonizing our energy sector. And just by a show of hand again, who knows the difference between your electricity sector and your energy sector? Who thinks it's the same? Two people. Who thinks it's different? Okay. So it's an important concept because people need to understand that to understand how we can decarbonize globally. Your electricity sector basically is what you produce for your grid, for your power. Your broader energy sector, in contrast, it's your electricity sector plus your total energy supply. For example, it includes building sector, because buildings, you need heat to keep them warm. It also includes your transportation sector, because you need fuel / energy to drive a car, or you need fuel, again, / energy to fly a plane. So let's keep that in mind first. I took the example of Ontario, but now let's go globally now, what that means. Currently, we are projected to release about 50 gigatons of CO2 per year. And your energy sector is currently about 35 gigatons. And for those who don't understand what 35 gigatons mean, it's 35 billion tons of CO2. I see Dinara smiling. Billion. That's what we need to reduce to reach net carbon zero. So let's see how we have to achieve that. This is taken from the International Energy Agency Net Zero by 2050 report. And first, let's focus now what's happening. Two things that I highlighted in a box there that we need to understand. In terms of your electricity sector, 60% of your electricity generation currently is coming from fossil fuel. In terms of your energy now, again, including your building sector and transportation sector, that number is 80%. So keep that in mind. Now, who can guess what's the share of nuclear energy in terms of electricity generation globally? 10%. There you go. Extra cookie for this guy later. So keep that in mind. Now let's see where we need to be at in 2050. Again, I'll pause there. You could see in those circles what's in terms of your sector, what's the carbon emission per these sectors. Now 2050. First thing you gotta notice, net carbon, which means 35 billion tons have to come out, right? And how are you gonna achieve that? So this is again, IAEA net zero report. Couple of things that's key to reach that net carbon zero. First, we all know, we've heard that from politicians and world leaders in the G20 meeting and also in the United Nations General Assembly. Renewable energy, your wind and solar, will play a key part and will make up to 90% of the electricity generation globally. 90%, so keep that in mind. But three things need to happen again. Because looking at Ontario example, it's not just enough for your electricity sector. So what are these three things? Low carbon hydrogen will be key in the future. Second, building will have to be zero carbon emission, and industries need to be from low emission sources. These are the things that needs to happen. And guess what source of energy can help with all these? Sorry, I'm not hearing anything? Nuclear, yeah. And we'll see how. So let's get into sector by sector. The first I want to tackle is the electricity sector. 14,000 megatons of CO2 per year. Two things we've already seen. We've seen from the electricity map, nuclear is green, is clean and low carbon. The second thing I've mentioned, renewable will make 90% of the electricity generation. So you might be thinking, we could just reach that with wind and solar. Why do we need nuclear? This is an important question. And perhaps one of the biggest advantage of nuclear is this source of energy can complement the high integration of wind and solar in the grid to make a stable and resilient grid. And how so? So it's in terms of your flexibility requirements for your grid. And what I mean by that, we all know wind and solar are intermittent sources. They are there when it's sunny. Today I see New York is very sunny, or when it's windy. But there may be scenarios or instances in the short term, let's say for minutes or hours, where you don't have too much sun or too much wind, you end up being 2,000 megawatts short. Or in the long term, for days or weeks, you don't have any wind and solar. What needs to happen from a grid perspective, you have to have flexible capacity to take care of this shortfall, both in the short term or long term. And what are these flexible capacity? Maybe your battery storage, your pump hydro storage, or hydrogen, which will take care when the renewable generation is not there. Now you're asking, how does nuclear comes into that? So with a higher share of nuclear as part of your electricity sector, the less of those flexible capacity that you require. In 2021, France did an excellent study where they looked at 6 different scenarios. 3 scenarios that has only 100% renewable generation, but with varying share of wind and solar. And the last 6 scenarios, they looked at with an increased share of nuclear as part of the grid. So in those scenarios, one thing that they see clearly is with an increasing share of nuclear, your flexible capacity decreases. So with nuclear, you only need 30 gigawatts of flexible capacity in terms of your storage or other hydrogen sources. Without nuclear, you would need over 70 gigawatts of flexible capacity. And some people might not know what 70 gigawatts mean. It's 70,000 megawatts. And if you think of the French grid, on most days, they only need 57,000 megawatts for their electricity generation. What that means on a grid perspective, if you have less flexible capacity required for your grid because you already have nuclear, and by the way, someone said hydro as well at the start. Hydro is another one that can decrease that. Your grid is very cost effective. And from France study, it actually shows that you save about 10 billion euros. So if you convert that to US dollars for those in American, it's even more saving per year. So this is why when we think of can we meet it by just wind and solar, the answer is no, we need more than that because we need a stable and a resilient grid. I'm going to touch on 2 other sectors. Basically, district heating. We spoke about the building sector, and buildings, again, needs heat to keep them warm, and that's where most of the carbon emissions come at. Currently, 90% of fossil fuel takes care of the global district heating requirement, and district heating is just a system to pass heat to keep your building warm. Now, how come nuclear play a part in that? Well, we all know nuclear energy produces heat. That heat can be used to heat up buildings, but this time it's low carbon. It's a technology that's already being used. 55 different nuclear reactors across 9 countries provided district heating in 2021. And these countries include Czech Republic, Hungary, France, and Russia and China. So this is another application nuclear can have to decarbonize that 1,200 megatons of CO2 that we are currently emitting from district heating. The next one I want to speak about is your industry sector. One of it is desalination. So desalination is the process of providing clean water for drinking purposes or irrigation. Currently, who can guess what's the share of desalination power plant that's being provided by fossil fuel? Anyone? 99%, which means it's currently emitting 250 megatons of CO2 per year. Well, nuclear can play a part in that. How? Again, nuclear, we all know, provides electricity which can be used to desalinate and power the desalination plant. But this time, again, it's lower carbon emission, about 20 times less than fossil fuel. Application worldwide, it's already being used. There was 5 reactors across India and Japan that use nuclear power to desalinate their plants. This is going to be key in water-stressed areas such as the Middle East and Northern Africa. And I've laid out 2 examples here because we all know the global water demand will keep increasing by 2050. In Pakistan, for 11 years, the Karachi nuclear power plant, powered desalination plant, and for that 11 years, they produced 5 million cubic meters of desalinated water. 5 million cubic meters means 5 billion liters for those who are thinking in terms of their water bottle. Egypt, Al Daba plant, which is currently being constructed, has a project for their nuclear power plant to power their desalination unit and produce about 170,000 meters of desalinated water per day. I was looking what that size in terms of a football stadium. It's about 170 football stadium per day that this water can fill. And last thing, while I wrap up, it's hydrogen. Again, I've mentioned it's a clean source, but this time, currently, most of the hydrogen that's being produced is coming from dirty sources, such as coal gasification or steam methane, natural gas reforming. For those who know the color scheme, it's called gray hydrogen. But now, nuclear, what it can do, it can produce that same hydrogen, but this time cleanly through high temperature electrolysis. This is what we call pink hydrogen. And this low carbon hydrogen can have many usage in the future. For example, you can use hydrogen to decarbonize your transportation sector, which is being looked at a global scale. You can use that clean hydrogen again from nuclear for your industry applications as well, because this time it's clean. So that's my last thing to you. If anything, I want to remember, because I passed on a lot of numbers for you, which probably it's difficult to remember everything, but two things I want you to remember. 35 billion tons that we need to cut. And it's not enough to just do that just from your electricity sector. We need to think broadly in terms of your energy sector. So with that, I'm going to leave you with very good resources to learn more about nuclear, that Nuclear for Climate released. And there's the QR code, and it mentioned all the different applications nuclear has to reach a net carbon zero. That's all I got. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Veeshesh. And yes, the electricity map is a wonderful website to go to see what countries have decarbonized and how they did it. But for our next speaker, we have Dinara. Dinara is the Innovation Chair of the International Youth Nuclear Congress. She's an alumna of the current organizer of the Nuclear Innovation Bootcamp, working alongside the Anthropocene Institute to support young climate activists and advocates. Well-respected public speaker and a nuclear technology expert, Dinara holds a doctorate from UC Berkeley and has worked to facilitate collaboration between manufacturers of nuclear power plant equipment from Spain, Italy, Germany, and Russia. Dinara and I even traveled to Egypt last year to represent nuclear energy at COP27. Dinara Ermakova.
Thank you, Matt, and thank you everyone for coming and sharing your time with us to learn more about nuclear and ask some questions. I wanted to tackle, well, first of all, I'm coming from the country which on the map that Veeshesh has shared is colored in gray, meaning we emit too much or don't provide any information, but that's part of being part of developing world, is that there's not so many infrastructural opportunities or like information sought to provide like to the global data systems. But the motivation of the talk today is actually to share perspective of those either developing regions or rural communities that we have here in the United States and around the world. So I'm going to talk about coal to nuclear talent transition that actually vice versa. Sorry, it's coal to nuclear talent transition. Sorry. And here I wanted to share and start with some numbers. Again, as a scientist, I love numbers. I like to share some stat. Amazing, we're gonna close 173 coal-fired units by 2030. That's great news. We need more of that. The problem with that is that we don't see real people behind that. It feels good about closing the coal power plants, but what about the people who work there? And if we put people into perspective, it's about 1 million of workers who are directly employed by fossil fuel industries last year. No matter how you want to decarbonize, you have to think more about what's going to happen with these people, how they're going to live in those communities. And for many people in those communities, the coal plant or gas plant is one single job providing place. And so they stay in those communities because they have the jobs and they have their kids there, they have schools there, and once there is no more jobs, they just leave the area. And just to put more numbers into perspective, that means it's another 12,000 or up to 34,000 of people getting fired, they're getting notice that the coal plant gonna be closed, and that really gonna hit the local communities. Opportunities like the tax revenue is gonna be reduced. Meaning the school and medical system will be collapsing, and so young people will be leaving the places, and so it will be disproportionately occupied by people who are older and who are going to be using unemployment benefits. So it has tremendous impact on society, on those communities who right now get employed by fossil industry. I'm not advocating for that, but it's just one thing to keep in mind. And this is one part of the problem. How are we gonna decarbonize the economy and secure further pathway for those employees who actually work right now in the fossil industry? And the second problem is actually we have we want our nuclear industry to take the role of decarbonizing power. And there is a big perspective for nuclear to have a role in this clean energy portfolio and take place of those fossil units. So how does it gonna work? US domestic nuclear capacity has a potential to scale up to 3 gigawatts by 2050. That's a big number. So how is it gonna work? I don't know yet. The problem here is we don't have too many people right now. So each gigawatt of current nuclear fleet employs about 600 people at any given year. And if you take into account the site preparation, decommissioning, other operations, that number goes into thousands. So that's a massive amount of people you need to employ, you need to find, train, and send to the site. So that's one of the problems that we have now. Is like, biggest problem is not the finding the investments, it's not working with public yet, it's not trying to advocate for it, it's just like finding the workforce that will be working in nuclear. Because historically, because there was a big drop in interest for nuclear for a while among students, right now we have a big gap to cover to build that workforce who will be building further small modular reactors, current fleet, name any. And this is not only in the United States, this is a global problem. It's not only something that we're facing today. So the solution for both problems were to employ the transitioning coal people from the existing fossil fleet, and actually cover some shortage in the nuclear demand for talent is, I guess, is pretty obvious. Transfer the talent, transfer people who already have some skills. Well, most of them have a tremendous experience working in coal or gas plants. They already know how to operate plants. They already know how to maintain them. So they don't need too much training on that front. And also, they have this employment opportunity once the nuclear becoming available in those communities. So I think that's kind of seemed obvious, seemed tangible. How is it going to work, though? And what are the challenges in training or transferring the skills and talent into that nuclear opportunities? Of course, it's hard to tell that it's like one-to-one match when you say, oh, we have coal plant, let's decommission it and bring nuclear online. Well, first of all, it takes long. We know how far behind the nuclear industry in building, in deployment, in small modular reactors. They will be available not today, not tomorrow, in several years. So we have to admit that. And before that, we actually need to think about the pathway, how we're gonna match that gap. And just to share with you that today we have to think about the transfer of knowledge. How is it gonna work? Who are we gonna train? Who will go without training or with small certification, short certification programs, or who needs to be retrained completely? The second, security. That one part is easier to cover because in nuclear power plant, if you're a non-citizen, you probably won't be able to operate a nuclear plant. So, and coal plant workers, you're usually citizens, so it's like easier to cover the security part of the problem, but at the same time, you still need additional level of security training for people who are gonna be working in nuclear plant and who are gonna be guarding the nuclear plant. So those things also have to be taken into account and also properly executed. And another cost related is to actual education. Who's gonna pay for that training? Is it gonna be a private entity that's gonna be providing some certification programs? Or is it gonna be government funded training programs? Or is it gonna be like some of the funding resource due to decommissioning coal plant? Maybe they can have some funds developed specifically for retraining, which usually how it should happen if you fire a lot of people, some benefit package such as additional training programs. So there are pathways that we need to think about who's going to pay for this education and retraining. And then how this educational infrastructure will be built. So we don't want to just like take people from one side to another. It's ideal to have people staying in their communities to keep them alive. We have already infrastructure from people who care about their community, who don't want to move to another side. So how is it training gonna work? Is it their short programs to train, or someone's coming to their side providing the training, or there are online opportunities? So all the things you need to think about before you actually start implementing. So I highlight the challenges are not easy to fix. It's not one day solution. It's something that we need to start thinking today. And this is also a very good challenge to solve as an investor, because I think the revenue from building the capacity from this gap on this challenge will be tremendous. And value for society also is hard to imagine how big the impact will be, just providing this opportunity for people from those communities who want to stay in the communities, but because their job opportunities are leaving, it's really hard to think what will be the next step. And there are case studies actually that's been studied by Idaho National Lab. Well, they led the studies, but it was done in collaboration. And just to share some numbers, because it's probably hard to put the things into perspective before you can compare one power plant to another power plant. So in the case studies, what they discovered is that if you replace a large coal plant, which is like 12 megawatt electric, which is like large scale coal plant with 2 units, with about 1 gigawatt capacity nuclear plant, and the difference is intentional because nuclear power plant works at higher capacity, so it produces more electrons per capacity unit. It works 24/7. So the match will be pretty much similar for generation. So in terms of how many, how much of economic activity impact we will have is that as much as 275 million of economic activity increase, the nuclear construction on existing coal site will bring to the community. This coming as from direct employment, then we will have indirect job opportunities for people who are gonna be working in the community development, in transition, and in infrastructure, in education opportunities. So those indirect jobs plus direct jobs, they will bring such a tremendous impact in terms of economic opportunity. This is increase in tax revenue. That means we can make better schools, we can make better medical system, we can build better roads. This is something that we need to think more, like how we can bring better value for the communities. And at the same time, it will add 650 new employees, 650 per each project. People who already trained as nuclear engineers, who trained in a field on top of people that we try to retain on those communities who already work in a sector in fossil industry. So I think that's a good numbers to think about. Like, we're not only offering clean energy solution, cleaner air, and better job development, we also provide amazing economic development to the region. And one of the things that I heard while I was talking, I spent some time mentoring people who try to transition from different industries to clean energy industries. What I hear a lot is that, well, I don't have a nuclear engineering background, but I find the industry very interesting. It's it's really ramping up in terms of like startups activities we have, in terms of research development we do. And the thing is that nuclear industry, as much as any other industry, seeks people with various backgrounds, like marketing, PR, economics, operation, and so many other roles that nuclear power industry can employ. So that's not necessarily that you have to have only engineering background. It's helpful, but the opportunities to help with this transition, to help with building a more resilient, clean energy supply chain and clean energy portfolio requires people with various backgrounds. And in those communities, people have different backgrounds and different opportunities. And another point is that in most of the discussions about transition and shutting down nuclear plants, again, as I showed in the first slide, it's very dehumanized. You just see number of coal plants or capacity removed of coal plants, but you don't see the communities behind. And many of those communities, I have to emphasize, they don't have any other job opportunities. They don't have any other projects coming. And when we build other green sources, they don't require 24/7 maintenance people on site in the same amount of people. So those things, they're not taking into account as of now, but I think this is where nuclear power and nuclear power plants can play bigger role. First in this country, in the United States, and then we can spread this experience and, I believe, big success around the whole globe. With that, I'm gonna show you the last picture. I think this is a very good picture that depicts how nuclear could play a bigger role. And coming back to what Veeshesh shared, that will be big in terms of industry development, like where we have hydrogen, where we need high quality heat. And this is where all the communities could benefit hosting different industry projects and keeping those communities alive. Well, thank you so much for listening to talk. I'm gonna proceed further. We have still people to present.
All right, continuing the conversation on the clean energy transition, we have Emily Nichols. Emily is a program coordinator for the Gateway for Accelerated Innovation in Nuclear, and she focuses on making connections and coordinating resources for coal communities interested in adding nuclear energy. She has served in marketing communication roles for nearly 20 years, including those in journalism, nonprofit advocacy, corporations, and government, and she holds a BA in photography and writing from Montana State University. Emily Nichols.
Thanks, everybody. Good morning. Thank you. So let's see. My name's Emily Nichols, and I work for the Gateway for Accelerated Innovation in Nuclear, or GAIN, because that's a big mouthful. And GAIN is a Department of Energy, United States Department of Energy initiative that helps bridge the gap between the folks that are in innovative private sector working on advanced nuclear, and the national laboratories. And there are 17 national laboratories in the Department of Energy complex, just as a note there. And so we act as an access point for folks that might have need to connect with facilities or experts in the national lab space. And recently, we've started opening that up to the nuclear curious community. And that includes folks that may be at a utility that doesn't have a nuclear background, perhaps leaders from regional or local governments, and communities themselves. Excuse me. So let's talk a little bit about the work that we're doing with coal communities. About a year ago, the Department of Energy put out a report by the Systems Analysis and Integration team that talked about the opportunities of going from retired or retiring coal plants to nuclear. And within that report, they talked about, they screened coal plants across the United States and found that those that had either a closure date or had recently closed had great opportunity to transfer to a nuclear facility. About 80% of them screened out in that initial screening. Excuse me. So that was exciting, and certainly our team has fielded many of those questions from communities and states across the nation, asking how might they start on that transition if there's interest. So I'm going to talk about a couple of states that we're working with specifically. Certainly, Kentucky is one of those states that coal is in their veins, right? The generational work has been done in those communities in the coal sector, and we started that conversation. It was surprising to me that they had some interest in nuclear, just being that coal is so important to them. But that has happened in the last year or two. We started out with a conversation. This gentleman here is Julian Colvin. He's a 22-year-old student at North Carolina State University, and he has ties to Kentucky. And he was attending a webinar where Bill Gates was speaking about nuclear innovation, and he had some interest, and he wrote in the chat, I'm a student, I have interest, how do we get advanced nuclear to come to Kentucky? How can we draw those folks in? And Bill Gates didn't answer his question, but the person that did is Christine King, who is the director of GAIN, and she wrote a note in the chat back to Julian and said, "Let's talk." And so that began a conversation that we started in Kentucky, where we connected with Julian and with the Office of Energy Policy. Excuse me, get the right one on here. Where we started having these conversations about, how can the utilities get engaged? We started a webinar series with their state to get the conversation started. And one of those conversations ended up with us connecting with a coal plant who is currently working on a study with us, looking at the site analysis. They're better understanding what their coal facility may look like in the future. They have an interesting model because their closure date is until the 2040s, so they have more time than many of these coal facilities that are closing. So they have time to really think about what their options might be and if nuclear might be within that space. And so we're working with them to better analyze and understand what their site might look like, if it seems like it's feasible to have coal or nuclear replace that coal space or dovetail within adding nuclear to that space. And also looking at a technology assessment on the types of advanced reactors that are coming along and the timeline and their goals, what might make sense for their space. And so, yeah, they're currently in that investigation space, and it's been a really nice opportunity to understand the needs of coal communities in Kentucky. In this is my home state, Montana. I was born and raised there, and we've been engaging with a coal community there that powers much of the West. The power that comes out of this community goes clear to the coast, to Washington and Oregon, and they have a closure date now. The town that we've been working with is based completely around coal, and much to like what Dinara had said, that these communities will absolutely go away if their plant goes away. So they're looking at some pretty hard questions of what is next for them. They live at the end. Basically, the road that goes to their town is only there because of the plant. There's nothing beyond them. People aren't coming through or going on their way to something else. They're simply coming to this town. They have a lot of amazing infrastructure and amenities in their tiny little town due to this coal plant and its history there. Certainly, all the jobs are either direct or tied to indirectly to the coal plant, and things like their water system. Here's a picture of, I should say, excuse me, that they also strip mine coal right there. So their source of coal is directly from the land close by to the plant. This picture is of the reservoir that they built. They pump water, I believe it's around 50 miles from the Yellowstone River to this reservoir to use mostly for their plant, and a portion of those that water rights goes to their citizens. And as the change happens, questions like who owns the water, those types of things come into play and are concerning for them. There's also some record fish in that reservoir that everybody enjoys the recreation of spending time on that water. Let's see. So we'd been asked to come to their community and have conversations about nuclear, speak to audiences in their gymnasiums and in their auditoriums at their schools, to have conversations with people who have basic questions about nuclear. What might it look like if they were to add nuclear to their diverse mix of opportunities coming up? Legislators asked us to come. I'd like to call out Dwayne Ankney's mustache because it's pretty incredible. He's a state legislator and a wonderful man who is very excited about the possibilities of nuclear coming to his town to continue to share the opportunity of being energy producers in their area. They work with a very small staff. Many of these towns are very tiny. They may have a staff of 2 or 3 people, maybe an economic development person who works for the region. It's a tough space because they're trying their best to figure out what their next steps might be. So we look forward to being able to help them with those decisions and offer resources. Obviously, we can't make that decision for them, but we want to be able to connect them to resources and information that'll help them make those next steps. And a little personal note, this is me in front of their generating station. My grandfather and my father both did ironwork to supplement their farming. They would come down and helped build these units back in the 70s and 80s. And so it's special to me to be able to connect back to a place that helped my family grow, and also to see what the future might look like. So I'm proud of that. Our next state is Arizona, and we like to call this trip 4 hours and 4 roads because they are a rural community. They are disadvantaged. We don't like to say disadvantaged, actually. We like to say that they're under-resourced. They are a remote community that barely has internet in many of their spaces, and they're working really hard to figure out what their next steps might be. It's a 4-hour drive from any major airport, and we get a lot of windshield time in when we go to visit. They've offered time for us to come and interact with their folks in their towns several times, and we'll be back there next week, actually, and we look forward to that time spent. We got connected to the St. John's folks when one of their city workers, their very small staff, started making phone calls and trying to figure out their next steps because they knew that their plant was going to close in the near future. Their time frame, I believe, is in the early 2030s, but that comes quickly. So they were making as many calls as they could, and they landed with NAYGN at one point. And so we started having conversations about how we might be able to help. And what that has turned into is a 18-month feasibility study that we've been spending time, we just completed. We've used the Electric Power Research Institute, or EPRI's, guidelines to assess the site location, as well as technology that might fit with the goals for that community and that utility. We've worked very closely with Salt River Project to complete the study. And in this study, we also worked with our economics team to look at the economic impact of what that might look like for them. We're pleased to say that study will be out very soon in a public space. And, working with these folks has been really, really wonderful. We were there last week, I believe. We've been there a lot lately. We were there last week, and we were sitting around the table with their mayor, who is also a coal plant worker, who is also a football umpire, who is also a rancher in the area, and kind of a big gruff guy. And he came to tears talking about how important it was to their community that they have options now. By working with the utility, we were able to talk them through what might it look like. We knew going into this that it may not be a yes for nuclear, it may be a no, and that's okay. Understanding what their next steps are available to them was the most important piece for us. And so it was pretty touching to be able to hear the community and the mayor say, gosh, now we have some hope and some decisions to make and some steps to make something work for moving forward. So that was exciting. Here's just a couple of pictures of us at our last visit. So then, I like to say that we are dot connectors or nuclear phone a friend. We like to be someone that folks can come to and are very accessible, and then we can look to other groups where we might not have the expertise, but we're going to help you find that expertise within the government systems or laboratory systems. You know, many of these folks, like I said, have very small staff. They may not have internet. There's a lot of issues there with access, and we can't just send them a new tool. We need to actually get on the ground and help folks. Certainly the resounding questions that folks have are around jobs. What will jobs look like? Will there be jobs? What does that transition look like? How hard will this be if we do transition to something like nuclear? You know, these folks take great pride in the work that they've done for generations, and they should be celebrated for the work that they do. They've powered our nation's homes, our infrastructure, our innovation, and it's something to be proud of, and we're happy to help them continue to be energy producers. This is just a couple more brief slides. This is from that Arizona study that we did. This has to do with the economic impact that my colleague Jason Hansen from Idaho National Lab and his team, and they're certainly finding that there's potential for both tax implication as well as jobs, all looking in a positive direction if someone were to transfer from coal to nuclear. Top skills, Dinara talked about this a little bit too, but there's an easy transferability between plant workers, and in many cases they just need a small amount of even on-the-job training where they would be able to transfer skills and experience that they're already using at their coal plant. We work with many other governmental organizations. One example is the Loan Programs Office, who's working to try to work and figure out ways to make it easier to transfer and get these advanced reactors moving on and on the ground. They're a great resource. We also recently became a partner in the Communities LEAP program, which will include nuclear this next funding round, and folks will be able to have technical assistance from our group and experts from around the national labs as they consider nuclear and might have questions in their proposals. And certainly we work with the Interagency Working Group on Coal. One of those ways is working with the rapid response teams that have been divided across the nation. There are they are great resources in that they connect into other government resources as well. Certainly things like labor force and the USDA and the US EDA. So another connecting of the dots. Quickly, we work with, in a monthly basis, we work with all of these groups in a research team that all these folks are looking at coal to nuclear and what that transition might look like. So the work is happening quickly. We wanted to make sure nobody was overlapping. We want to collaborate. So we meet monthly with these folks to talk through the work that everybody's doing. And we do, again, we work with all the states on legislative issues, technical assistance, connections to resources, and sometimes we testify in those states. In the last 2 years, we've seen a huge uptick of interest in nuclear across the nation, and certainly this dovetails with the work that we're doing in coal to nuclear. And lastly, we are having, if you're really interested in coal transitions, we're having a conference called Adding Nuclear to the Mix that will be happening in Morgantown, West Virginia, November 14th and 15th, and will be 2 days of all things coal and nuclear and how these transitions might happen. So I appreciate your time. Thank you, and look forward to questions.
Emily hopped on a plane from Idaho National Lab in very short notice, so we really, really appreciate that, Emily. I want to introduce our last speaker for the morning before we take a quick break for coffee. Emily mentioned she looks forward to questions. I think all of the sessions from here on out for the rest of the day, we have time for questions, so just to give you a note on that. But I want to introduce Osama Baig. He has a background in nuclear engineering and over 5 years of experience working in the nuclear industry. He creates informative and educational videos by demystifying nuclear energy, as well as features clean energy leadership in his podcast, Going Nuclear. Osama is a member of the communications group Nuclear for Climate, a delivery team that will be at the world largest climate conference, COP28. Osama.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for this opportunity, Generation Atomic, Nuclear New York. So I really appreciate this opportunity, and I'll jump right into it. So in my presentation, I'll be chatting about the advancements in nuclear technology, right? So there's a lot of talk about advanced nuclear technologies and also applications outside of electricity production. So I'm going to be doing not too much of a deep dive, but I'm going to be going through some concepts related to these topics. All right, so let's start with our global emissions. 52 billion tons of emissions of carbon emissions are produced per year, right? And out of those, only 27% come from electricity production. So from our talks that were held before, we've learned that a lot of the big solution for electricity is nuclear, because it's net zero greenhouse gas emissions. However, there's other areas that we need to decarbonize if we want to get to net zero, and which includes keeping cool and staying warm. So like Veeshesh mentioned in his presentation, district heating, right? We've also have 31% of making things. So this includes concretes, steels, plastic, and various other industries that are manufacturing the materials that we need to build our homes, build our infrastructure, and that's a lot of our emissions. That's majority of our emissions. And then we have transportation, so cargo shipments, and a lot of marine transportation can also utilize nuclear to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, right? So in this presentation, I want to go into some of these areas and leave you all with some information so that you can do your own research on these technologies. All right, so like I said, I'll be going, so what's the difference between a conventional reactor and an advanced reactor? I think a lot of folks have this question, what is the difference? So conventional reactors are the reactors that are generating electricity right now as we speak. These are generation 2 reactor technologies, which include light water reactors, heavy water reactors, if you're in Canada, and they are technologies which operate on a thermal spectrum, right? So they operate at around 300 degrees Celsius, and they do a really good job in producing electricity, right? So I consider these like kettles. They're producing electricity, and they do a really good job at it. Now, advanced reactor technologies, they come in different flavors, different types, different designs, but they have benefits which include increased proliferation resistance. There's increased efficiencies in terms of the fuels that they use. They can even burn, a lot of the designs can be used as burner reactors to burn existing our reservoirs of spent nuclear fuel, right? So that's a really cool advantage. And also, I think a really good benefit of advanced nuclear technology is that instead of operating at that 300 degrees, you've got these reactors operating at 900, 800 degrees Celsius, which is enough for these high, these industrial applications like mining and like making steel. So this is the advantage of advanced nuclear reactors. They really open up the doors to help us bring down that 31% of emissions from making things. All right, so here's a really cool graphic. I hope you guys can read that, but if not, I'll squint a little bit and translate for you. So here's our existing fleet of reactors, right? Light water reactors and heavy water reactors. And they're operating at around 300 degrees Celsius up there. And that's enough for district heating, seawater desalination, and a few other industrial applications, right? So, 55 reactors across the world right now, a lot located in Eastern Europe, are actually producing district heat, right? So those applications are within the realm of conventional reactors. But right now, here are some developing reactor types: SMRs, small modular reactors, right? These are being currently developed in a modular style so that we can have economies of scale when it comes to nuclear. It reduces the cost significantly. We've also got liquid metal reactors and high temperature gas reactors, right? So these are currently in development mode. We will see these in the next couple of years. And then we've got future reactor types, right? Which include molten salt, supercritical water, and then gas-cooled fast reactor. That was a tough one to read. All right, so before I jump into some of these reactor types and kind of simplify them, I want to look at NEA's SMR strategy, and I think the small modular reactor strategy applies to advanced reactors generally. The NEA is the Nuclear Energy Agency, and they have a really good resource called the NEA Small Modular Reactor Dashboard. I highly recommend checking it out. But in their strategy, they go through the different areas which need to be developed before new reactor design can actually be implemented. So this includes like policy, you need the regulatory side of things, you need the legal frameworks and security. You also have to figure out the fuel cycle, right? So if, for example, if you're going to develop a reactor that burns fuel from conventional nuclear reactors, you're going to need to figure out how you're going to source that fuel, how you're going to reprocess it, right? So what are the steps for this nuclear fuel cycle, right? Then you have the supply chain and infrastructure, right? So a lot of new countries that are embracing nuclear, like in Africa and many other areas, they may not have that supply chain and infrastructure. How do you develop that, right? And then you have the talent pipeline, right? So I know Dinara really did a good job in talking about how that talent pipeline is developed. And we're seeing the retirement of coal power plants. This is a great opportunity for the nuclear industry to help redevelop develop people's expertise in this area. Public engagement, right? And then it needs to make sense in an economic way, right? So you've got all these applications, right? Like district heating, potable water, hydrogen, and synthetic fuels, but it needs to compete with fossil fuels, right? All right, so here are some of my favorite top advanced reactor tech. There's a lot more that each of them would need its own course to explain, but I'll go through a few of them just to give you a flavor of how these reactors work. Starting with the pebble bed reactor. This reactor type is a Generation 4 reactor type. It's the fuel is a trisul fuel. It's the size of a grapefruit, and it kind of operates like a gumball machine, right? So you've got these fresh fuel coming in, dropping in, and every day kind of cycling, right? And this it's cooled not by water, but actually by helium, right? So when you have this different coolant and moderator, the reactor can basically operate at very high temperatures. So right now in Canada, there's feasibility studies being done and development of a reactor type by X Energy, and they're looking at using it for dual electricity and process heat purposes. So this is a really cool technology that's being developed right now. Then there's also the molten salt reactor, right? So you got those salt shakers up there. So similarly, the molten salts are really interesting because the fuel can be liquid as well, right? So the fuel can be mixed in with the coolant and the moderator. And what's interesting is that this reactor can be used as a burner reactor. So in Canada, there's a company called Boltex. They're investigating the use of spent CANDU reactor fuel in these molten salt reactors, right? So there's a lot of R&D in this area that's ongoing, and it's a really cool proven technology, right? So like the United States has shown that this technology works, right? However, there needs to be additional investments. There needs to be some more research and development in this area. And then you've got the high temperature gas reactor. I got a chance to, when I went to Japan for an international conference, I got a chance to actually walk inside one of the world's only high temperature gas reactors, right? And I was really impressed. They're using it for hydrogen production. They're using it for various research. So it's really impressive to see that these technologies are being developed. And then here's a huge list of some of the vendors that are doing the work, right? I mentioned a few, but there's an extensive list of vendors that are developing different types of reactors. And you may be noticing some of the names, recognize some of the names like Rolls-Royce, yeah, I'd recommend checking out the NEA dashboard if you're interested in learning more. This is the cover. You can find it online. And so I'll jump into some of the applications for these reactors, which, if you look at the global shipping industry, if it were to be a country, right, in terms of emissions, it would be up there, right below Japan in terms of emissions, right? So this is a significant opportunity for the industry, for the nuclear energy industry, right? Marine transportation, it's a proven technology. We have icebreakers, we've got submarines, and also various, I think there's around 200 small nuclear reactors that are operating right now in the world's oceans, right? So it's proven, it's safe, and there's a lot of benefits, right? You don't need to stop for refueling. You've got a lot more space in terms of cargo because, as you know, nuclear is energy dense. It doesn't take up as much space as fossil fuels. So there is a lot of R&D and research ongoing for application of small modular molten salt reactors in cargo ships, right? So this is a really cool area of interest that's going on. And then desalination, right? So desalination is going to be very, very important for everyone in the world, right? We've, look at California, right? A lot of droughts across the world. I think with climate change, we've seen an increase in droughts. We've seen an increase in requirements of fresh sources of drinking, of fresh water sources being depleted. And so when you look at desalination, one country that really shines is the UAE, the United Arab Emirates. And over 90% of their water source comes from desalination power plants, right? So over 14% of the world's desalinated water is consumed in the UAE, right? So, and just to paint a picture of one of their plants is around 1,200 to 2,000 megawatts of energy. So these plants are natural gas powered or oil powered, and they produce process heat and also electricity. So this is a great application for nuclear to kind of substitute. And then mining and refining of minerals, right? So mining is yet another really good application of advanced nuclear reactors because it's kind of operates like a battery. You've got a reactor, 20 years, you put it on a site, and it does its work, right? There's a lot of logistical issues with shipping in diesel to remote areas, and nuclear power really has some great advantages for remote mining operations and also remote communities, right? And yeah, just to end off, I think these are a list of some of the other applications that I think were spoken about in some of the other presentations, like hydrogen production, right? Hydrogen, who knows, may be the new future fuel source. And I think nuclear energy is a great way to produce the hydrogen. Then you've got synthetic fertilizers. In Indonesia, there's a lot of research going on as to how can we utilize Generation 4 reactors to make process heat to create these synthetic fertilizers. And then remote communities, right? I think the accessibility piece about nuclear energy is bringing power to those that really need it. So like if you go to the Arctic in Canada, a lot of remote communities are dependent on diesel, and they're looking at nuclear as an option because diesel needs to be flown into those communities per year, which sometimes doesn't make it, especially when the roads are icy. There's remote communities in Australia which also have issues when it comes to power. So I think that's another really interesting application. So there you have it. Hope you enjoy this presentation, and hopefully this is a bit of an appetizer for you to go on and do your own research into these technologies. But appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Okay, so now we're going to transition to a very short coffee break, 15 minutes. And when we come back, we're going to bring all 4 speakers back onto the stage for a panel discussion about how the world is rekindling its love for nuclear energy.
Welcome back, everybody. Please take your seats, and if you can silence your cell phones. We have our morning panelists up here to continue the discussion that we started in the morning. We learned some really interesting things about nuclear and beyond, and so wanted to give opportunity to kind of eke out a little more and offer an opportunity for the audience, both here in person at the Baruch Performing Arts Center and those online joining us from around the world, to ask us questions. So just to get started, my name is Isuru Seneviratne. I'm from Nuclear, New York. So we are super excited to co-host this event and get this amazing group of panelists to join us. So just wanted to reintroduce you all for folk who are joining us online. So we have Osama Baig from Ontario, and we have Dinara Ermakova from California. And we have Veeshesh Sunassy from Ontario as well. And then we have Emily from Idaho. Yes. So and the way that we are thinking about doing this is I'll ask a few questions that I've prepared for you guys because I'm really interested to learn, kind of explore what you just talked about, and then we'll open it up to questions from the audience. So again, thank you so much. Maybe I'll start with you, Veeshesh. So you talked about the youth kind of getting involved in this nuclear advocacy. You've been to COP, I believe, previously. So how can organizations such as yours, such as NAYGN, kind of play a role in helping kind of change this narrative of nuclear or bring this into the conversation, advance the conversation?
For sure. I'm really glad to be representing NAYGN and Nuclear for Climate today, and also glad we have 2 other Nuclear for Climate delivery team members in Dinara and Osama with us today. So, okay, youth, I think, plays a key part in terms of climate change. 2 days ago, during the UN General Assembly, the UN Secretary General, Antonio, said something that resonated very, very well with me, and that stuck in my mind, which I want to repeat here. So there's 2 things he said. He said climate change is not just a change in temperature, it's also a change in people's life. Most of these people's life, it will be the youth that will be impacted because we'll have to survive with that. The second thing he said, loud and clear, he said anyone who is championing climate change and helping in that, he is behind us. So I think this is where youth come in because we have a different perspective. we may not be expert in all the different things about climate change, but we have an important voice to play. And how we can do that, I see the first thing in terms of advocacy. When we go to conferences, you mentioned COP or any clean energy conference, like you will see youth, very different from corporation or from policymakers who are all wearing ties. I know I'm a bad example today, I'm wearing a tie, but usually you would just see us in a t-shirt. Different colors, sometimes it's a pink shirt, sometimes it's a purple shirt, sometimes it's a blue shirt. Very recognizable, and people will just come to us because everyone is wearing suit and ties. And they would just try conversation. Why are you here? Why are you here? So this group of passionate people, and what I like to call as we do things through a grassroots way, and Nuclear for Climate who sends delegation every year to COP. For example, when I mean grassroots, it's like very, very low key. Like for example, we would have hand bananas to volunteers and just explain radiation. So this is how you do the advocacy. Just simple, just talking to people, but at the same time, you're reaching out to those climate activists, to those policymakers. Second thing, which you'll probably all agree youth is very good at, is social media. In terms of communication, especially now you have TikTok, which is really big. Even my grandma are using TikTok now. This is where youth can play a part because so many people are going on TikTok and it's a different channel or avenue that they can have. And I'll mention three organizations, youth organization that's doing a great job for that. One is NAYGN, they have a huge TikTok channel, but also in Europe, there's the Spanish Young Generation in Nuclear, Jóvenes Nucleares, very good in TikTok. So these are how youth can play because I don't see like a corporation or like a country going on TikTok and posting very funny things, but at the same time sparks a lot of question about nuclear. So that's the second piece. And the third piece, so I spoke about advocacy, second, the communication, and the last piece is in terms of policy outreach. One thing I'll mention for youth, there's a conference of youth that happens every year and it's part of the United Nations COP as well. And basically at the end, the COI team, the Conference of Youth team, releases a declaration that shows what they need to support. So last year, that was 100-page that they issued in terms of what youth can have an impact in climate change, and there was no mention of nuclear. But this time, the team is sending a delegation for COI that can go and advocate to include nuclear as part of that policy-making procedure as well, which is passed to the COP team. So,
Great.
huge
Thank
impact, yeah.
So maybe one, we talked, the morning session talked about this just transition concept for the workers. I want to address you, Dinara, like, why are we seeing all these coal plants close? Is it climate policies or is it just the plants are reaching end of life? What's the driver there?
Yeah, there are both factors playing in place, but mostly those shutdowns driven by policy. It's like around the world, we need to reach the net zero goals. We need to get to certain targets. And at the same time, yes, the fleet is aging. So they're naturally coming to the age of 30, 40 years as they were designed for. But if there was no policy reinforcement, they would probably be extended, which we also see. Some plants are working for much longer because extension of coal or gas plants is easier procedure than that for nuclear. But because there are external factor as the net zero targets and adding the clean energy standards, those just emphasize the need for those transitions.
Yeah. And maybe that's a good segue to Emily. I think you had the slide which was pretty, there's a lot of transferability of skills. Why is that the case? I've heard, some reasons, but you're an expert on this subject.
Sure. Hello?
Yeah.
Okay. transferability between the coal plant and the nuclear has to do with the balance of the plant is essentially the same. They're going to create steam in a different way by a different source. So a lot of those operator positions, folks that are working on generators, all the balance of the plant are similar or the same positions, and certainly they'll need some additional certifications and that type of thing. But they're seeing that there's a lot of transferability between the two different types.
Yeah, and that's super important to make sure that those workers get better quality jobs, but also better paying jobs in the nuclear industry.
Yeah, often those folks are going to be paid more in the nuclear space, and overall the economic and the job income is going to increase for that region.
And maybe this is a good segue to you, Osama. I mean, you're working in the nuclear industry. What could you tell us about the kind of safety culture, practices, processes? Why is nuclear such a safe working environment, both for the workers and for the community at large?
Yeah, it's a good question. The nuclear industry is one of the safest industries in the world, and I'm not saying that because I work there. If you go to a nuclear power plant, you can eat off the floor of a nuclear power plant. Like, that's how clean it is, right? And I was just sharing with someone that when you go into work at a nuclear facility, the monitors that are detecting you are so sensitive that they can pick up like radionuclides that are naturally occurring just outside, right? Like, so when it rains, sometimes when I go into work, detectors go off just because of the radionuclides that are what were once in the atmosphere have gone to the ground. And so we have to scan in and scan out every time we go into a nuclear plant. All the workers have bioassays, meaning there's samples that are collected from each of the workers to make sure that there is no increase in radioactivity. One of my colleagues, I'll give an example, worked at the nuclear facility, Pickering Nuclear Power Plant, for over 20 years. And the amount of dose that they got, because our dose is registered nationally in a register, and it's connected to your SIN number, that dose was less than one flight from Toronto to London. She got more dose from one flight from Toronto to London than spending a whole career at a nuclear facility. So that just goes to show the safety levels in terms of radiological safety. But then there's other aspects of safety as well, the safety culture, you have the conventional safety protocols that are at nuclear facilities. But I would say I'm more safe at a nuclear power plant working there than at home, because when you work at a nuclear facility, you realize how many hazards are actually out there in real life. So yeah.
So that's where you go for safety. No, we've heard that in when earthquakes happen, some nuclear plants, people come to that plant because that's the most secure, the most with the ability to withstand different levels of Richter scale of earth movage. But
we can add on the performance assessment that every single plant has to go through when they apply for license. We have to account for events that hypothetically probably will never happen, like a volcano eruption with a probability of 10 to minus 8, whatever that will mean to you. But the chance of that happening probably is 0, but we have to account for all these scenarios in case if there's any external event, and we have to make sure that the new constructed nuclear plant will withstand, and there will be no release that will harm the environment. And I don't think that's well communicated to public, the level of regulations that nuclear industry has to workaround to build anything. And yes, complaints about how long it takes, how much it costs, they're valid. But most of the time it's related to regulatory standards that are increasing because of people not understanding that it's already safe enough, and they try to take their energy and make it even harder for industry to build anything. So I think that's one of the reasons I think nuclear is safe, is that we have to go through this more and more stringent requirements with every new power plant built, which is not true to any other industry. Compared to any other energy industry, there are no end of life cycle procedures, like waste management is not well included into the price right now, and at some point we will have to pay for waste streams for other energy sources, and at the same time an environmental impact, the whole holistic understanding of the environmental impact of like coal. Right now we only account for CO2 emissions, but there are also particulate matters. There are also the coal ash that's being stored next to the coal power plants, and there are several hazards that happen because the ponds with coal flash got flooded. All the toxic components got released into environment, and people got affected because it's really, you get open landfill full of highly dense heavy metals, toxic components sitting next to the community or city.
Also, one quick comment, which I think maybe we don't stress enough. I think the confidence that people get from nuclear, and also for us advocates to go and talk to different people, that confidence we got is due to the great work that nuclear operators and all the support staff are doing. They keep the plants running reliably, safely. So a lot of thanks have to go to them because they are very professional, they are on top, and that gives the public confidence that nuclear, they know it's clean, but it's also safe. And then for us, it's easier for even us to go and advocate on behalf of nuclear energy. So that's a thing that we should really think about, like these people that work in a plant and even the support staff that support all these panel operators.
And maybe this is a good way to think about our title of our event here is how the world is rekindling its love for nuclear energy. So what do you see are the main drivers? So what do you think our government's doing to advance that message?
It's a great question. A lot is happening. If you follow the nuclear news, there's a lot of happening. And one thing that I didn't see before, even though I'm just 6 years into the nuclear industry, is all these partnership and cooperation between those countries. I'll mention just a couple of them, but that gives me confidence again in the future as a youth. Yeah, 2 days ago, or it was yesterday, Romania and Canada announced a partnership deal to have 2 nuclear reactors constructed in Romania. 2 months ago, France and India had a partnership about new SMRs. We've also seen UAE and Poland through ENEC doing partnership to advance nuclear reactors in Poland and decarbonize those the electricity and energy sector. I think this is great because that gives the public and the global world confidence that all these countries are collaborating, because it's a global challenge now. It's not just one country, it's a global challenge. And the second thing, like for these countries, I think they need to be very clear on the onset what they need to decarbonize that energy industry, and how they can do that is right through by communicating that and having that in their national plans for decarbonization, what we call national determined contribution, or long-term strategies that each country has to submit to the United Nations every time. Be clear on that we need nuclear to be part of that mix, and again, to complement that high penetration of wind and solar. For example, we've seen France has it in their national determined contribution, Canada, India, and for Poland, they are, for example, a country that is thinking about decarbonizing, or even UAE, which is keep adding on nuclear in their mix. They have it in their plan. Other countries have to do the same and be clear and give that clear message to the public what their plan is about, and just not mess around with tentative plans.
Anything from the US side? I mean, I know you guys are getting out, and you are getting calls from these coal communities saying, help us. But what do you think the government here is doing to advocate for nuclear, or what's the role there?
Yeah, we certainly are getting a lot of calls from states. I think we've spoken to 40 of the states this year who either want additional information about nuclear in general, or have questions about what policies they're working on and how that might include nuclear. Certainly there are a lot of tax incentives and other incentives around how communities might transition from fossil to a cleaner energy that folks can tap into. So I think that that's a big piece of this.
And I think the Inflation Reduction Act for the first time leveled the playing field between solar, wind, and nuclear.
Correct.
So that they get the same kind of tax benefits.
Yeah,
so this is kind of a starting gun for.
Yeah, there's a lot of opportunity there, and some opportunities to kind of stack some of those incentives too.
Right, sure. I think some of those incentives, if you are going to an energy community like a coal community, you get more. So I think up to 50% of the capital expense is paid for by the government.
Yeah, we're hoping for that to be some good incentive, because these projects are big and expensive, and if that can be mitigated a little bit, and some opportunities with the loan programs office, they're working to figure out ways that they might help not only just provide loans, but also potentially some kind of insurance to overrun expenses and that type of thing.
Got it. What we hear from some academics and some politicians that solar and wind and storage is all we need. Is that true? If so, what's the story there?
I guess I'll take a step. First of all, nuclear has been very politicized topic, and I met people who are in politics who intentionally avoid word nuclear. Well, at least that was the case 2 years ago, when they're like, I'm very much pro, I understand the benefits, but I know that I will not be sitting in the office and people will not vote for me if I start bringing nuclear in on the table. This year has been different because the war in Ukraine has shown how much we depend on gas coming from Russia. I'm talking about more European perspective right now and global perspective. And that impacted a lot the political situation in the United States when some politics started openly saying, okay, I'm pro-nuclear. People on their own also started talking more about their positive view on nuclear. And on some of the public hearings, we see more public support coming from local businesses, from people who never supported extension of nuclear power plants. They now show up and they're not embarrassed anymore to say, we are pro-nuclear, we understand all the benefits, and we are not afraid of saying that. So that's one of the side. And second, I think that was also very much emphasized in terms of investment. So many investments before IRA, they were flooding into solar, wind, battery sector. So this is why they became cheaper, and this is what they advocate more today. But if nuclear at some point had as much investment, I would expect the learning curve also be going down in terms of cost. That's a natural process as you start manufacturing at scale, start building factories, supply chain, things becoming cheaper as you build expertise. So this is what we see in China. They build at scale the same reactor type, they build many of them, and the cost is significantly cheaper.
Right, the same kind of cost decline we've seen in solar and wind in the last decade or so, we are also seeing by the Chinese and the South Koreans as they deploy the same reactor type.
And Isuru, just a quick thing, like for those politicians or people who are saying we only need wind and solar, the best thing is to send them the electricity map and they'll see for themselves, right? Like countries that have high wind and solar, what's happening on those days that you don't have the wind and solar, and just look at the electricity prices, which in Europe, some countries have over 100 euros per megawatt in terms of their electricity price. I think that they might be convinced after seeing that.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody wants to take a stab at what's happened with the kind of German energy vendor project, which was predicated on this 100% renewables only kind of model. I don't know if any of you guys want to say anything about what's happened there.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I was talking to, this morning about what happens when you have high integration of wind and solar, which is great. But you also need to have flexible capacity when these are not there. And right now, what's taking care of when you don't have the wind and solar in two ways: short term, in terms of minutes or hours, or in terms of days. These shortfall in your renewable generation are coming from coal plants. So it's negating it, right? That's why this is where nuclear can have a part of that. So it's important, yeah, ramp up that renewable generation capacity, but in terms of your flexible capacity to take care of that shortfall, this should be clean as well, because this shouldn't be missed. It's good to be, it's important, we should go towards clean, but your grid have to be stable and resilient as well. So pick a source where there's hydro or nuclear, if that could be the answer. So this is what Germany was missing when they ramp up, but taking care of that flexible capacity that they need. That was missed.
I will add to that. So Energy Vendor was built with assumption that Germany will have access to cheap gas. So last year, this access to gas had to be cut. And this is where we started seeing, well, the program doesn't work. First of all, Germany is not the sunniest country in the world. It's a northern country, so relying on solar and wind is not wise. But building the grid where you have supply of the base load coming from any other sources of energy, such as gas, coal, or nuclear, that would make the system work. But when you see that the cost of gas, well, price of gas is not stable anymore, the system starts collapsing. This is where Germany started seeking for their coal reserves, and now what's happening, they're removing their aging wind fleet and start digging coal underneath those wind turbines. This is not funny anymore because we see the impact. It's not well thought strategy about their energy grid. It's not resilient. So now Germany became one of the examples of countries that had it all. They had resources, they had needed expertise, but they chose decisions that were driven by politics, and they're not good for the society.
So we want to open it up to the audience. If you want to ask a question, please raise your hand and my colleague will run to you with the mic.
Hi, my name is Ed Ho. I'm from Toronto. It's great to see half the panel's Canadian, and there's a great diversity on the stage. That's a general comment. it's funny, we came to the topic of, I'm calling it climate dissonance, where the nuclear energy people are fighting with the renewable energy people, and there's a constant we call it dissonance between those sectors. And when we get down to the decarbonization of the whole grid, we're all going the same direction. And why do you think we keep getting in the same room and fighting about, you know, everything we agree on? It's sort of like, how do you resolve that?
Yeah, I think we are seeing a bit of a change in the narrative, right? We're seeing those groups that were eventually, you know, hardcore renewables on one side, and then folks that are, I like to consider the nuke bros, right? Nuclear can solve everything, and really converging, right? We're both sides of the coin are saying that, hey, listen, the renewable people that are traditionally supporting renewables only solutions are saying that, hey, listen, nuclear energy does have some incredible potential, and the traditionally nuke bros, and they're also opening up their minds to say that, hey, listen, it's not a one and all solution. We need to all be on the table, right? And I think when it comes to nuclear energy, there's a perception out there historically that it's unnatural, right? It's not natural. It's not like the wind or like solar. It's something that's artificial, right? And you know, one example that I'd love to share is that of the natural nuclear reactors that were found in Gabon, right, in West Africa. So there, for a lot of folks that don't know, there were natural nuclear reactors that operated in West Africa, and they found these. Obviously, they weren't like our power reactors. They're simply reservoirs that were filled with water, and they had uranium. And so every time water came into this reservoir, the fission reaction would start. And so scientists, they found that a lot of the waste products that were produced, within 2 billion years, they only traveled a few centimeters and didn't contaminate the environment, right? So I think even going to natural analogies like that of the reactor is called Oklo, you can look it up, goes to show that the uranium that we mine from the earth, we use it in our power reactors and we safely dispose of it. It's definitely a part of the natural life cycle, right? Even like the waste disposal methods that are used are based off that of Mother Nature, right? Like the clay buffers and the analysis that is done. So I think in terms of nuclear energy, there's, you know, that story hasn't always been there in the forefront. And now these stories are being shared through social media, through young advocates. I believe that we're coming to the same table and saying, hey, listen, we need to be pragmatic. Yeah.
Veeshesh?
What I'll add to that, because this is a very good question, and this is what can determine the future of nuclear as well, as how can we work together with a renewable group? And that's why, in terms of Nuclear for Climate organization, our youth movement, one of the key messages is clean energy for all, and together is better. When we go to advocate at the United Nations Climate Change Conference, we're just not saying we need nuclear. We need nuclear with wind, with solar, and we are clear on that message. I know this year, Women in Nuclear and Women in Renewable Energy had a memorandum of understanding that was signed for collaboration and cooperation. This is great. I've, at least on my 5-6 years in the industry, I've never seen that sort of collaboration. So this is great. And this is where, as Nuclear for Climate as well, we go to these clean energy conference. And even in our panel and webinars we do, we want to have not just nuclear people speaking to nuclear people. We want to have a diverse panel, not in terms of just location, gender, but also in terms of these clean energy, which means having speakers from the solar industry, from from the Sustainable Development Goal 7, or from different parts of the world that can give that renewable generation perspective as well, and how nuclear can help, and also renewable generation can help nuclear.
Great. And let's get more questions. Wow, we got lots, so.
Yeah, I'm Len Rodbert with Nuclear New York. Dinara's and Emily's talks especially raised the question of what's the criteria for where you can put a nuclear plant? I wish you would talk about that, because I think the issue of the fact that new nuclear plants don't need to be near sources of water isn't very well understood, and it changes the whole picture of where nuclear plants can be thought of as being placed. You're talking about Arizona. Let's hear a little about that.
Sure. Certainly, there are requirements around what that looks like, and those are changing, certainly. There are, I mentioned the EPRI guide for assessment that we looked at the type of facility and the type of land that would need to match those requirements. And so that's kind of a starting space for a community that might be interested. They could work through that guide. That's publicly available information. Certainly there are requirements that folks are going to have to meet that may be different than, say, a coal-fired plant. We're finding that often a lot of those requirements kind of dovetail and are going to match up in a good way in some of those communities. There could be issues with remediation from the coal ash or that type of thing in specific locations. So it's really a case by case basis. And your discussion around water, that's certainly in the West a very big issue. Water resources are scarce, and some of these new technologies have the opportunity to be air-cooled versus water-cooled, so there are a lot of opportunities there, and things that folks are looking at.
I would add to that the main requirement is, I guess, communities' consent to have nuclear technology, because this is where we have a lot of misunderstanding, that communities don't volunteer or they expect someone to come to their communities. First, they need to share their concerns about their employment and say, hey, we want to volunteer to be that site, and we want to have this feasibility study, because otherwise it will be really hard to start any work with them, because by default, not in my backyard kind of culture really scares nuclear developers, and we need to engage with communities well in advance, 5 years in advance, 10 years in advance, to get to the point when we can start building. So with that in mind, I would like to encourage communities to step up and say, hey, we understand that in 10 years we don't have any future work opportunities, and we would like to be considered for this transition and be the site for those studies, feasibility studies.
Great. So we got lots of questions, and I would ask the panelists to keep it brief so that we can get to many of them as possible, but also be aware that we are all available and we want to continue this conversation. So check out our websites and contact us. We'll be with you throughout the day. So, sir.
Hi. Hi, I'm Denise. So this event is called Nuclear Power, and we're talking about nuclear power. And so under nuclear power, there's fusion and there's fission. There's two main reactions, just like under chemical power, chemical energy, there's wind, solar, fossil fuels, oil, and gas. And so I was wondering why this choice is being made to kind of put fusion and fission into the same bucket, because it makes it very difficult to, I think, have conversations about fusion energy, given that it's gaining a lot of traction and has now over $6 billion in funding. And so these two, fission and fusion, are reactions that are very different, have very different reactants and products and kinds of radioactive waste and nature of reaction in terms of the possibility of a chain reaction. So I was wondering why this explicit choice is being made to talk about nuclear power when you were talking about fission.
The fusion confusion. Who wants to take that one?
I can speak to that.
Please.
Yeah, so I think nuclear fission and fusion are definitely both really powerful sources of energy that we need to invest in both. I think this conversation, our conversations have really been focused on nuclear fission, because nuclear fission, humans have been using this resource for like almost 7 decades now, right? And nuclear fusion, big fan of nuclear fusion, by the way. The technologies that are being developed are incredible, right? So you've got ITER in France, which is one of the world's largest projects, collaborative projects across the world, where countries are investing money in this research project to see if we can get this tokamak donut-shaped reactor running, right? Creating plasmas, and so I think both need to be part of the discussion. I think the focus sometimes is on dispelling the myths around nuclear fission, because when people think of fission, there's a negative stigma associated with it. There's a lot of thoughts like Chernobyl and Fukushima and things that come up, whereas it's a technology we have right now that we need to deploy on mass scale because we have a climate emergency, right? Nuclear fusion, on the other hand, is, there's a funny saying that nuclear fusion was always 50 years away, right? And honestly, I think we are hitting breakthrough. We're getting some incredible milestones, like but I think the fusion conversation doesn't always happen because universally everyone agrees that it's such a great thing. I think the conversation we need to have is, fission facilitates fusion, right? Like at the nuclear reactors in Canada, if you look at the fission reactors or CANDU reactors, give it a little bit of a shout out, we are producing majority of the tritium, the main fuel source, which is so rare that it's being used in ITER, it's being used in JET, it's being used in a lot of the experimental reactors, fusion reactors across the world. So I think these two technologies, they have synergies, they work hand in hand, and we need to invest in both of them. So hope that answers the question.
Great. Thank you, that was really helpful.
Thank you to all the panelists, really interesting conversation. My question is mostly geared towards the coal to nuclear discussion. And interestingly enough, as you raised it, the TerraPower Natrium was actually going to site itself on whether it's the coal mine or the coal plant, and they essentially decided to be, I think, roughly like 5 miles away because of the radiation of the coal. So it's just so ironic. But has a lot of those conversations with the coal communities been about on-site replacement or nearby replacement to be able to use some of the different infrastructure, because it's obviously not a one-for-one. But the second question is related to that one-for-one. A lot of the reactors being commercialized are microreactors, small modular reactors, and a lot of these coal plants, as we saw in Dinara's presentation, are mostly in the 600 to 900, if not more. So are these coal communities thinking about one-to-one replacements in terms of power output or increase in power output? And how does that relate to the concepts being developed that are typically smaller than those outputs?
I'll take a shot at that. Certainly, a lot of folks are thinking about adjacent to. I think they're finding that if they're going to build a brand new facility, they might not necessarily want to tie into an older facility. But the value there is the infrastructure and the things like transmission lines and water resources and all those things that are already in that space, potentially rail lines into the space. So there's a lot of research being done to talk about whether a brownfield or greenfield site, but it's to be seen in many places. But like you said, in Kemmerer, Wyoming, they are going to be adjacent to. And I guess sorry, can you repeat that, just that little last piece of the second question? Did I? Yeah, so I'll try to speak as loud as possible. Yeah. But in essence, a lot of the reactors being developed are SMR. Oh, yeah. The size, right, sorry, capacity one for size. Sorry, I just blanked there for a second. Yeah, a lot of folks are looking to match size for size for what they are, and potentially grow the amount of wattage that they're putting out. Some folks are also thinking about, beyond putting electrons on the grid, are also thinking about process heat and how they might support. In Kentucky, they're looking at the potential for producing that heat into nearby steel production facilities, gypsum, chemical. So they're thinking about things a little differently and how they might, some of these folks are thinking about that modular piece where they might need to ramp up over time too, starting with a smaller number and ramping up to a larger amount of projects.
Great.
Yeah, I guess I add to that because there are a lot of considerations why coal to nuclear is so attractive for nuclear developers. Is that also in the ideal case, we want to use the existing assets of coal or gas plant, like turbine, and then the whole administrative section. So once we probably come up with the idea how to standardize the remediation procedures for ash ponds and area around the coal, like remediate all the pollution that already happened, and who's going to pay for that? Because of course nobody budgeted for that, and someone eventually has to cover those costs. I think this is when we can start thinking about like direct replacement of coal burning section to nuclear, because ideally that will save so much on the cost of those assets that could be reused.
Yeah, I think somebody already mentioned nuclear is the only energy industry that actually provisions to take care of all its waste streams. So that's a really kind of, what about the waste? We're going to have a panel on that later, but it's actually the one that actually takes care of its waste more than anybody else. So go ahead.
Kind of a follow-on question for Emily. Emily, in terms of the recent IRA passage, I know there's an element around production tax credits for hydrogen from nuclear, which I'm kind of interested in whether or not you're going to see, you're going to try to avail yourself of. But before we look at that, one question I have is, why not just add scrubbers to existing coal plants that are not scheduled to retire and pull CO2 out of the atmosphere where it's being spewed into it, given that we've got, we only have 400 gigatons, scientists say, before we go above 1.5 degrees Celsius globally. Why not just start scrubbing it at existing coal plants now?
I think that is the case in some places. I think that is the thought of, finding that in between space of what are we going to do before reactors are online. And so I think that is being considered. Say that again, I'm sorry. Yeah, I think there are a lot of communities that are considering kind of multitude of options, and there may be bridging that gap with a hydrogen space. They may be creating some sort of mix where they have integrated energy systems in their plans.
I think one of you guys mentioned,
The mic doesn't know what to collaborate, right?
I think one of you mentioned the kind of, some of these coal assets are reaching the end of their life. So you can extend it and put a scrubber, or you can kind of repower it with the nuclear, and that's kind of cleaner in general. So that might be one of the reasons.
Well, thank you first for the fascinating panel. And my name is Nir Schwartz. I'm from Tel Aviv University. And I want to ask that there is no doubt regarding the potential of the nuclear energy to reduce the global carbon footprint. Just after we experienced nuclear accidents in the 3 Mile Island nuclear reactor and in Fukushima nuclear reactor, my question is, and it's in the 2 countries maybe with the highest safety standards in the world. My question is, when you offer a global transition to nuclear energy, can we really estimate the potential risk of this offer?
Yeah, I can take a stab at that question. Yeah, so I think there is, when you look at Japan, it definitely has an incredible safety culture, right? But when it comes to the nuclear industry there at the time, I wouldn't say that was the case, right? The TEPCO, it was privately owned, and the Fukushima site, they were told well in advance to make infrastructure changes to the tsunami barrier, as well as to the diesel generators as well. It shouldn't have been in the basement, okay? And so TEPCO chose not to make those investments, right? That's called negligence, right? And so the folks recently, I think it was a few months ago, that made those decisions at an executive level, they were fined, right? And I think the fine was in the billions of dollars, right? So I believe the global culture of nuclear safety is the best in the world. Like, you have organizations like WANO, World Nuclear Operators Organization. You have institutes like the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, which really do an amazing job in advising. First of all, they advise and they provide a really good oversight over all the nuclear facilities across the world. Number two, they go and audit every single nuclear facility in the world, right? Whether it be in Russia, whether it be in any country in the world, regardless of global conflict, they're going to be there, and they're going to make sure that the world knows that this power plant is not operating well, and here's why. So I think there's a lot of infrastructure, there's a lot of frameworks, there's a lot of global entities right now in the world that do a really good job in maintaining the status quo, right? So I think, Chernobyl is another good example of, the Soviet Union and strange things happening, and these regulatory entities not necessarily existing at the time. So I think a lot has changed. After Fukushima happened, every single nuclear power plant in the world made changes or improvements to how they operate. The global community, the nuclear community, is really well connected. It's learned the lessons from these incidents, and it has the right organizations to make sure that once we get another 100 or 200 nuclear power reactors online, they're all going to be running safely.
And we know that poorer countries do have nuclear energy, and as of now, Bangladesh, Turkey, and Egypt are building their major projects, but I believe they're all very well secured. And
I want to add to that, because same as any other industry, nuclear industry is learning on those accidents. It's not like accident happened and the rest of industry is like, well, happened and let's move on. No, we take that experience, we learn from this, we update existing plans and the accident scenarios for the future plans. So as any industry, like the aviation industry, how many accidents we saw before, but today it's one of the safest way to travel. And compared to any other industry, how many times have you heard about accidents on coal plant or oil spills? They became, first, they are not regulated as high, so we don't even know how many accidents and people die on those plants. Second, nuclear has to inform about anything that happens on nuclear plant, any leak or anything that goes wrong, we have to inform the public first, which is not enforced in any other industry, unfortunately.
Hi, I'm Rebecca. I was wondering more about international partnerships. So when you spoke about them, you spoke about Romania and Canada, France and India, which are not, collaborations between the greatest powers. And so how is collaboration really possible long-term between, the greater powers and the rising powers, especially because, the United States wouldn't sign on the Kyoto Protocol because China and India weren't obligated under it. Is there actual possibility for long-term collaboration between the global powers that are trying to maintain their status in the system?
I think that's a great question. So they just met for the G20 summit in New Delhi, and one thing that was very interesting is after the leaders met, the 20 top countries. So when you speak about those with the most power or influence, or even in terms of the major economies, The text that was released from it has a clear cooperation for nuclear and SMRs as well, especially small modular reactors. This is how you are seeing greater collaboration in terms of the biggest powers, because it's not only the single bilateral partnership, but also globally, because I think Dinara spoke about the supply chain as well, which is key, right? So if you have those global partnership, and again, between the biggest economies, that's what can make nuclear cost competitive. So we are seeing that, and the G20 summit shown that.
And I'd make a plug for our afternoon session where we will be touching on nuclear financing and global efforts. So we've got an amazing expert, Alina, who's going to address that. Sir.
Yeah, I'd like to return to the first question. How about the dissidence between the hard renewables and the nuclear group getting together? I think there's an element within the hard renewable group that is looking at social change as part of the climate agenda. And essentially what nuclear does is throw cold water in that whole agenda that we need to stop eating meat, we need to eat bugs, that kind of stuff. So I thought maybe you could respond to that dissonance and how you could just call out that side of the hard renewable agenda, that the hard change is not necessary.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think societal. I think there's, when you look at the extreme greens, maybe I'll call them, there's a perception that we need to go to the good old days, go back to the good old days, and basically survive without electricity and cook all of our food on flame, right? So I think there's a perception that this is good for the environment, right? And I think what you pointed out is that there needs to be some pragmatism, that using more electricity is directly correlated with higher quality of life, right? Higher quality of life means taking a hot shower, which I enjoyed today, right, in the morning, or drinking some warm coffee, right? And I think even eating better food comes with more resources, right? Like water, fresh water, right? So I think when it comes to changes in terms of our day-to-day lifestyle, I do agree to a certain extent we need to make changes, but I don't think the changes need to be so drastic. In a sense, they bring us back to the ancient times, right? I believe the perspective that we need to look at things from is, like, let's look at Africa. Let's look at these developing nations, which are billions of people in the world are right now, at the moment, still using coal and other dung and many other sources of fuel for cooking food. Like, when they cook that food, they're inhaling those emissions. It's harming them. It's harming their families. They're in the homes that are being cooked. It's polluting the environment. Let's look at some of those analogies, and let's want the quality of life that we have, that we enjoy in the West, for the whole world, right? So that's, I think, we need a little bit of a shift in narrative, and we need to look at us as having that privilege in the West and wanting that for the entire planet.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I mean, one of the stats that was sobering to me was there's 3 billion people on the planet who consume less electricity than my fridge. So think about, the microwave and the TV and my cell phone and computers, all that is substantially more, and transportation and everything else. We want all that to be electrified, etc. So any kind of final thoughts on that subject, or we can call it a day for now?
Yeah, I will add to that discrepancy of how we see the world here in the Western world, because I'm coming from developing world, and in Kazakhstan we still use coal for power, like for heating the house, And I think this is where like the major voices, the strongest voices coming from Western world, emphasizing that we need to use less, we want to eat less, but the majority of population lives below those means. They don't have access to clean water, to electricity. And I think this is something that we need to understand when all those big decisions are made. It's not limiting the countries that already limited in so many ways. They don't have access to funding to make all this different diverse energy sources, to have those energy sources. They not transitioning, they're developing their grid from zero. So, and there is no solution that fits for everyone. And this is where I can say that nuclear may be not needed for many countries which have a very small population. They don't produce, like they don't want to manufacture anything, and maybe this renewable portfolio will be enough. But for countries with big population increase, with big potential for growing production, they need to work around those diversity. And this is, as I said, they building the grid from scratch, so it's different than transitioning. It's just choosing something that will reliably work 24/7, powering schools, medical system, and houses. So that's a little bit different.
Yeah, so this amazing conversations that we're having. So apologies to everybody who wanted to ask questions, but all of our panelists and our afternoon session folk are going to be here throughout the day. Please, we want to continue this conversation. For the folks who are online, so we will reconvene at 1:15, 1:20. Is that right, Matt? 1:30? Okay, let's do 1:30 start time, so we have ample time to have lunch and connect with folk. And then people who are online, the link to our afternoon session is different. It will be posted on nuclearny.org. Sorry, 1:15, apologies. So 1:15, we'll be back, and then we'll have another great conversation. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for the panelists.
Thanks, everyone.